Welcome everybody on this Monday afternoon to our Crochet 102 class. Hopefully if you were with us last week, you spent some time practicing and you're ready to learn a few new stitches today. Darrin is showing off the hat that you'll have all the skills to make after the class is done. We'll go over the pattern at the end of class once we've showed you some new stitches. I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Claire. I'll be hanging out with you in the chat there. Darrin is your teacher there on screen. I'm going to go ahead and put the handout in the chat here in case you missed that, both as a PDF and as a link. And if you have any questions during the course of class, just go ahead and pop them in that chat box and I can either answer them directly or I'll pass them on to Darrin. And now with all of that out of the way, we'll let him get started.
All right, welcome to class. Today we are going, it's Crochet 2. So we're going to learn how to do half double, double, and triple crochet, and along with a few other little tips and tricks that'll help things be more fun along the way. So if we want to go ahead and change the view to the view of my hands, we'll jump right in and get started. Okay, all right. So today in class, I'm going to be demonstrating with this yarn. Bring my computer closer so you can hear me. I'm going to be demonstrating with this yarn, which is Lion Brand Yarn Hometown Bonus Bundle. And the reason I'm using this for demonstration is because it works out very nice and can be seen very well on camera because it's a thicker yarn. Because it's thicker, it's easier to demonstrate with. It is a very nice yarn to make projects with, and it's available in a wide variety of colors. You can get it on lionbrand.com or michaels.com. But if you want to make the hat that we're going to review today, then you're going to want to use this yarn is recommended, and it's Lion Brand Heartland yarn. And this yarn's thinner, so it works up a little bit thinner. It's a very nice yarn. It comes in a wide
Darrin?
colors. Yes?
Can you just check the position of your computer? You're fading in and out quite a lot.
Is it close?
Make sure there's nothing over the microphone.
Okay, well, hopefully, is that better, you think? So this one comes in a wide variety of colors, and it's also available on michaels.com or lionbrand.com. So that's why I'm using two different kinds of yarns. To make the hat, you only need Heartland. So sometimes there's confusion and questions there. Okay? Whenever you're using yarn, though, you do want to check the back of the yarn. It'll tell you what size your yarn is. This is a number 6, which is a super bulky. This other one we were looking at is a number 4, which is a medium. And they're scaled from 0 up to 7, 0 being almost like thread, and then 7 being very, very thick. Make sure you know what size yarn you're using. It should give a recommendation on what crochet hook. This one is calling for an N13, which is the same thing as a 9mm. So you might hear people say an N, N13, 9mm. That all means the same thing. If you don't have this hook, you can usually go up one size or down one size without too much problem, especially for beginner projects. So if you don't have the exact right hook, go ahead and give it a try and see how it works out. It might be just fine. Okay. Any questions about hooks or yarn choices, anything at all? Nope. Okay. So just a real quick review of what we did last week. So to get started, you're going to need to tie a slip knot. And the way I like to tie my slip knot is I take the tail, which is the short piece, put it over the working yarn, which is the long piece. So we call it short over long. You put your hand in the center of the circle. You slip under that circle and you grab a hold of the tail. And then you're going to hold the tail and your working yarn together. And then you're just going to loop that tail back through and that's what makes the slip knot. And with crochet, it's especially nice if the tail is what controls the size of your slip knot. And that'll come in handy later on in other projects. So if you get in the habit of doing it this way, you'll be a little bit ahead of the game. So lay your yarn out like this, make a circle or a loop, doesn't have to be really a proper circle. Go under, grab a hold of the tail, hold the working yarn and the tail, and then you're going to loop that tail around your finger and bring it back through and adjust it by pulling the tail. And if you tie your slip knot in a different way, I'm sure it's probably just fine. There are many, many ways of doing it. And then I'm using a 9mm hook, which is what was suggested. Just pop it on your hook. You don't want it tight. It should move smoothly, fairly easily on your hook. So you don't want it really tight. And then we're going to do our chain. So when I do a chain, I like to hold my slip knot with my finger and my thumb and kind of pinch it and pull it down. You scoop up yarn, and then you pull it back through your slip knot. Again, not pulling it tight. You want to leave it fairly loose on the chain because the chain does tend to get tight. So you scoop up yarn, you yarn over, and then you turn your hook down so that way you can go through that loop. And this is the chain. If you need a good review, you can watch the video we did last week, and we go through all of this in detail. So you can get a review. And then we're going to count. So we're counting it let's count it from the hook back. You don't count the loop on your hook. Starting here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's work with 10 stitches. 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I've got my 10 stitches or 10 chains. So I have the one on my hook, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to have 10 stitches.
Hey, Darrin.
Yes.
When you bend your head like that, we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. So I'm going to be working with 10 stitches. So now with crochet, it'll tell you how many to chain when you're following a pattern. But if you're just practicing or making something up like I'm doing, once you decide how many stitches you're going to be using, I'm going to chain 2 extra stitches because I'm going to be working with half double crochet. And those 2 extra stitches are going to be turned up on their side like that. The 2 extra chains, I mean, are going to be turned up on their side, and that's going to create my side, the height for the side. So I have 10 stitches plus 2 for my side. So if you want to work with 10 stitches and you're going to do half double crochet, you'll need to chain 12. So you need those 2 extra stitches. So for half double crochet, the first step is to yarn over. And then I'm going to go in the 3rd chain from the hook. So we don't count the one on the hook. So we count 1, 2, 3. So we're going in the 3rd chain from the hook, or we're skipping 2. So you go in that chain, bring up a loop, or yarn over, bring up a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, and pull it through. I'm going to change hooks to see if this one, maybe there's a little better contrast, because that silver one I think was looking just like the yarn. So yarn over to start, enter the chain, yarn over, pull it back through the chain. So I've got 1, 2, 3, yarn over, and then have your hook facing down, pull it back through all 3. And then once you get going, it actually works up really fast. And it's going to look more like that when you get going. Okay. So let me show it to you really slow again. Yarn over, and then find your chain, go straight through, yarn over, pull it through, yarn over, pull it through all three. So are you able to see what I'm doing clearly? Is there a specific place maybe that is not clear? What can I do to help? Anything? Anything going on?
Looks like we've got just a couple of requests to see it all again, probably from the start.
From the start. Okay, so again, so from the start, from the slip knot or where from? Because the slip knot was really last week.
From the start of the half double crochet.
Okay. Because if you need review on the slip knot or the chain, we went over it very thoroughly last week, so you can watch that recording. So I'm going to skip 2, so 1, 2, and that means I'm going in the third chain from the hook. So sometimes the pattern will say skip 2, but usually it will say like half double crochet in the third chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, this is the third chain from the hook right here. So we're going to enter the third chain from the hook, yarn over, pull it back through. Oh, wait a second. Start with the yarn over, enter, yarn over, pull it through, and then you make sure you have 3. I didn't have 3 loops on my hook, so I knew I did something wrong. So make sure you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull it through all 3. Yarn, start with the yarn over, find where you're going to go through on your chain, enter your chain, yarn over, pull it through, yarn over, and then pull it through all 3. Is that helpful? Or is there a particular step we're not understanding clearly? I'm never sure how it's showing up on camera.
And just so everyone's on the same page, how many chains do you have there, Darrin?
I chained 12 because I wanted to work with 10 stitches. So I chained 12. And when I skipped 2 and entered the third chain from the hook, that's going to give me 10 stitches to work with. But how many ever stitches you have is fine because we're just practicing, but just make sure you count your stitches so you know how many you have, because we want to make sure we're maintaining the same number. So you don't have a lot though. Don't have more than like 10 or 12. You don't want to have too many for practice. So yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up the loop, yarn over, pull it through all 3. And it might feel really strange in your hand. It might feel really awkward in your hand, but with practice, it will become easier. So if you've never really done this before, if it feels uncomfortable or weird in your hand, that's normal. It will take some practice. Okay, any specific questions about any area that I'm working on? Any particular step that's not being clear? Let's count and see how many I ended up with. Make sure I'm maintaining my stitches. So to count your stitches, you can either, you can count them along the top. So you want to look for, it looks like your chain kind of. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there are 10 stitches. Or you can count them by counting the posts. So this was my chain 2, so that doesn't count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you can count the post, which is right here, or you can count these, what looks like a chain on the top. Okay? And then once you're sure you're ready, I'm going to chain 2 because I'm going to do another row of half double. So chain 2 to create that side height. Turn my work. And I'm going to go in this stitch right here, the very first one. But I do want to look at it first. Let's look at a few things to make sure we're understanding. So it's really important in crochet that you know exactly what stitch you're working in because it's easy to add or subtract a stitch by mistake. So let's look and see exactly what we have in our hands. So this big loop is my active working loop on my hook. That does not count. So we're not going to count that. I remember chaining 2 to create the side height. So I've got 1, 2. So you can see those 2 chains right there. That's for my side. And then this next one, that's my first stitch. So that's my half double stitch from the row before, the previous row. So it is important that you start looking at your work, remembering what you just did and looking and see what it looks like. And then you'll be able to understand what you're looking at in your hand if you made a mistake or exactly what you're supposed to be doing. So there's the active loop, there's my chain 2, so 1, 2, and then there's my first stitch. I'm going to use this locking stitch marker and I'm going to mark my first stitch. And then I'm going to go over here. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to mark my last stitch. And then that way I'll know where I'm supposed to start and where I'm supposed to stop. And that will be very helpful. So I'm going to yarn over, enter that first stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through all 3. And now I'm going to move that stitch marker up because I just made this stitch. I know that's my first stitch, so I'm marking it. And that'll come in handy in a few minutes. So yarn over, enter the stitch, bring it through all 3. Yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, bring it through all 3. You want to pull a little slack off your ball of yarn, makes it easier. Yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, bring it through, okay? I'm going to quickly go to the end to show you how to end the row. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be glad to answer any questions. It's going to kind of quickly get to the end so I can show you how to end the row. Okay. So this is my last stitch right here, and I have my stitch marker to mark it. I'm going to take the stitch marker off to just show you why that's important. So if you have really fuzzy yarn, or if you're working very loose, maybe your work looks like that when you get to the end. And it doesn't look like you have another stitch there. It looks like you've reached the end. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I only have 9 stitches, so that's not right. So you want to try to make sure you're finding that last stitch. And that's why a stitch marker is very important, because sometimes it'll hide. And that's an easy way to lose a stitch. And you don't want to lose a stitch, especially if you're going to do it more than once, and then you've lost 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches, and you're going to be in big trouble. So chain 2 for my side, turn your work. I've got my active loop, I've got my chain 2, yarn over, I'm going to work in my first stitch, and then I'm going to mark my first stitch, because when I come back to that on the next row, I'll be very thankful. Okay, so do we have any? I'm going to stop right here and rest for a minute and see if anyone has any questions about half double crochet or about using the stitch markers or anything at all. Is there anything I can explain more clearly? How are we doing, Claire?
You might have covered this more while I was typing replies to everybody, but it seems like we had a little confusion over the turning chain and how to start a row. Do you always have to make a turning chain? And then someone wanted to know, do you need to always single crochet at the beginning of a row?
Okay, so let me see if I understand the question. So whenever you finish a row, okay, so I'm going to finish this row. If I'm going to work another row of crochet, I do need to do a chain to build up my height for that next row. And we're going to cover this in a few minutes, but because I'm going to do half double crochet, I'm going to chain 2. Now a double crochet is taller, so for a double crochet you would chain 3, and for a triple crochet you will chain 4. Single crochet you just chain 1. So you do always need to make a chain up or a turning chain, but depending on what stitch you're doing will depend on how many. So for a half double, I'm going to chain 2 to create that height. So 1, 2, and that it's not a stitch, but it's creating that height. I'm going to turn my work, and you said something about a single crochet. What was that, Claire?
Yes, someone asked, how do I start a new row? Do I need to single crochet in order to start a new row?
Well, you don't.
Okay, just clarified. How many times do I need to chain for a single crochet? That is just 1. It has a turning chain of 1.
Yes, if you're working on rows of single crochet, then you would chain 1 for your turning chain for single. Okay, that answers that, takes care of it. Do we want to see double? Are we ready to see double, or do we have any more questions?
And just to confirm, you are also, you're going, once you've got past your first row, you're going under both legs of the stitch, right?
Yes, so when you're chaining, when you're working into the chain, you'll probably just go into under one strand of yarn for the chain. But when you're working in the stitch, you're going to want to go here, and that will be going under both legs. And other stitches, you might go in that one, you might go in this one, but for today, and we're going to go under both. Now, everything I'm telling you today that you have to do a certain way, that's to do what we're doing now. Later on, everything can change. You might be doing all kinds of strange things for different types of stitches, but for today, this is how we're doing it to create what we're doing today. So I've chained 3 for double, because a double crochet is taller. So we need additional height. So with double, you start with a yarn over, enter your stitch by going under both strands of yarn, you bring up a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook. So this is a lot like half double, it starts out the same. I'm going to yarn over, go through 2. Now I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, go through 2. And now I'm down to just my working loop. And so you'll start with a yarn over, enter the stitch, do a yarn over, bring up a loop, 3 loops on my hook, just like half double, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. Okay. How do we feel about that? Any questions? So we do a yarn over to start, enter the stitch by going under both strands, bring up a loop. I have 3, yarn over, bring through 2, yarn over, bring through 2. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a second and see if there are any questions at all.
think
Any questions?
Ashley has discovered the key to learning crochet or any new skill really, which is practice, practice, practice.
Yes, it is all about extra, just practice as much as you can, and try not to get frustrated with your practice too, because it is, you're learning something new, so you have to be patient. And each time you do it, it'll get a little better. Okay. Any particular questions about anything we've covered today?
I think we could probably, I see you're doing it already, do another demonstration for double crochet. Can you talk us through what you're doing, Darrin?
Okay, so now I'm at the end. I've got my stitch marked with my stitch marker. So do a yarn over, enter that last stitch. I'm going to take this out. Yarn over, bring it through. I've got 3 loops, yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2, chain 3 for my side, and then turn. And I'm going to lay it out like this to re-emphasize that the chain 3 is what is creating this extra height to make room for my new stitch. If you didn't do the chain and just started with your new stitch, then your stitches would be kind of slanted in and it wouldn't make a nice edge. So the chain 3 creates this extra height for the side and helps make your edge nicer. Okay. Any questions at all? How do we feel? How are we doing? Any questions, Claire? How are we doing?
I think we are good, and I'll give you a time check. We're about halfway through class already.
All right. We ready to see triple?
Let's go for it. Let's get into some crazy tall stitches.
And some crazy triple stitches. All right. So with triple crochet, we're going to chain 4. So I chained 3 for my double. I'm going to do 1 more chain. So this is a very tall stitch. So very tall. So with triple, we start with a yarn over twice. So we yarn over, we do a double yarn over. I've got 3 loops on my hook. Enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring through 2, yarn over, bring through 2, yarn over, bring through 2. So it's very similar to the double. You just keep bringing through 2 until you finish. So it starts off with a double yarn over. You enter the stitch the same way. You bring up a loop. And now we're just going to go through 2 stitches at a time. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 on my loop, on my hook. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yarn over, bring through 2, yarn over, bring through 2, yarn over, bring through 2. Double yarn over, and keep going. Okay. How do we feel about that, Clara? What do you think?
I think this is a wild and crazy stitch that you might not use that often.
No, you really don't use it so often. But if you want to make a scarf really fast, you could use big yarn like this and use this stitch, and you could probably make a scarf in an hour or less, or maybe 2 hours, depending on how big you want it.
Lexi has a good question. Would this stitch with the triple crochet result in lighter weight creations?
Well, it does have these openings. So, it would be, I think, more ventilated. And if you have a lot of really fuzzy yarn, then the fuzz might help fill it in. But yeah, it does. Would you call that lighter weight or just better ventilated, or how would you describe that, Claire? Because you
I
do
would
have
probably
these.
say like it creates a more open fabric for more ventilation, because
Yeah,
sometimes you say lightweight and you're referring to like the actual physical heaviness
yeah,
of the yarn.
thickness. Yeah. So you might not want to make a sweater out of this stitch unless if you're going to wear like a chemise or a tank under it. But I don't know your life. It just depends on what you're making, whether or not this stitch would be the best stitch.
Exactly. Lexi says like for a summer shawl or for like a beach cover up or something like that.
Yeah, might be very nice. I think I did something wrong there. So 1, 2. If you feel like you did something wrong, don't hesitate to back out of the stitch and go back at it. 'Cause if you're not paying attention, like I think I yarned over twice or yarned over once instead of twice because I wasn't paying attention. So just, if you're not sure where you are in the stitch, go ahead and back out of it and give it a fresh start. Any questions? Are we making successful triples or how are we doing? Okay, so I didn't mark my last stitch. So let's try to figure out where we should be going. Let's talk about it. So this is the stitch I just did right here. So if I try to find the next stitch, that would be the next one. So this is the stitch. I can see my stitches in there. And if I follow it over, my next stitch is right here. And if I put my finger in that stitch and look at what's after it, this is my turning chain. So I've got the stitch I just worked. I've got my next open stitch and then my turning chain. So try to get used to looking at your work and understanding what you're seeing. And once you start being able to understand what you're seeing, then you'll be far ahead of the game. You'll really be able to figure out what you're doing. So as you're making these stitches, look at how they're shaping up on your work. Pay close attention to what kind of shapes they're making and how they're fitting together. Because it's really important that you be able to learn to look at your work and read it. Okay, how are we doing? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, it's really easy to lose a stitch or add a stitch when you're learning. When I first started crocheting, I used to do that all the time and I'd get very frustrated. So any questions, anything I can demonstrate again to make it more clear?
Can you show us from the top of that row and how you'd count stitches looking down at the top of the row?
Okay. So when you're looking down from the top, let me know if this looks clear. So looking at everything we have, this is my working loop. So this is my active loop. We're not going to count that. And I chained 3 from my side. So let's look at the chain. So the chain's not attached to anything. It's just kind of loose. So you can see, so I've got 1, 2, 3. So I've got my 3 chains. I should have chained 4 for a triple, but I only chained 3. So there, I just found a mistake. I wasn't paying attention. So I've got my working loop. I've got 1, 2, 3 chains. So if I'm going to do a triple, I'll need to do another one. And then this is considered like part of my work. This is the first stitch right here. If I look down at the top, I can see these they look like chains or they look like knit stitches or little V shapes kind of fitting together. So once I eliminate these, so 1, 2, 3, then I can see that's my first stitch. So I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So did that show up all right? You want me to do it again?
I think
1,
that showed up pretty well.
2, 3. And then just each one of these counts as a stitch. So just where you would go for making a stitch, that counts. So 1, 2, so each one of these. Okay, any other questions?
No
Anything?
other questions on the triple crochet. We did have one a while ago that I think might be leading into what we're going to show next, which is how to change colors or how to add in new yarn.
Okay, that is exactly what I was going to do next. So let's do it this way. All right, so I'm finishing up my row. Do double yarn over. 1, 2, 3, double yarn over. That's my last one. So watch really carefully what I'm doing, and I'll show you more. I'll show you more than once, obviously. So double yarn over. Okay, so bring it through 2, bring it through 2. And just before I finish my last step, so my last step would be bring it through the last 2, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to attach this gold to it. And so I'm going to bring this gold, I'm just going to lay that gold on my hook. And my last step of my triple, I'm going to finish with this gold. So bring it through 2. I'm going to snug everything up a bit. And then I'm going to chain just 2 because I'm going to do half double. Okay, so I chain 2 for half double. And I'm going to work across half double really fast so I can change colors again to show you. Oh, I don't think I'm going to have enough yarn. Shoot. So let me show you how to do a half double then. So I'm going to do half double. Go through my last one, bring up a loop. So for half double, the last step would be to yarn over and bring it through those 3. So for half double, you yarn over, go through, bring up a loop, and then you add the new color. And then you bring it through all 3. I've added my new color, and then you chain how many you need to do your sides. So I'm going to chain 2. And then you would turn and then just work across that row as needed. So just work across the row. But I only have a little piece of yarn, so I'm not going to be able to make it all the way across. Okay. Any questions about changing color? I'm going to see it again. Just remember, you always work your sketch just to the last step, and the very last step is where you'll change your color.
Yes, can you show that again and also say that again because your head was turned and you were muffled.
Okay, 1 second. I'm trying to get a longer piece of yarn. I don't have any more super bulky, so I'm making this number 4 work by using 4 strands of it. One thing about yarn, you can always make it work. You can always figure something out. All right, so let's look at it again. So I'm going to do half double. So yarn over, enter the stitch, yarn over, bring up a loop. I'm at the last step. So I'm going to add this gold. Just lay it over your hook and then bring it through all 3. And then I'm going to chain 2 for my side. Turn my work. I'm going to work across and get to the other end, and I'll show you again. So think about questions. I'm going to try to quickly work across so I can show you the color change again. So I'm just doing half doubles quickly to get across. So are we making successful stitches, or how are we doing out there? Are we able to do it? Anyone making triples or half doubles or doubles? Okay, now I'm going to do my last one. So yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop. And I'm going to switch my yarn. So I'm going to reintroduce this gray.
And so since you were working half double crochet in this last row, that's why you've stopped with 3 loops on the hook, right? You've
Yeah.
stopped before the last step of that stitch.
Yep. Do you want me to do a double to show you a different one? So let's switch to double. So I yarn over once, bring it through 2, bring it through 2, yarn over, my last stitch, yarn over, bring it through 2, and I'm at the last step. So at the last step, you just drape your new color right over your hook, and you bring it through 2 to finish your last step. And then I'm going to chain, if you're doing double, you would chain 3. Turn your work, and then continue with your double. So you always want to change color by changing it in the last step of whatever stitch you're doing. Does that make sense?
We've got a couple questions here.
Okay.
Sharon wanted to know, is there a slip stitch with the new added color?
No, all I do to add the new color is just drape it over my yarn.
And then Meryl wanted to know, are you going to cut that the first color of yarn?
Okay, so that's a whole other topic, and there are a couple of different things that we can consider. Okay, so I just want to show this one more time. So I'm going to yarn over for my double, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2, and then I'm just going to take my gray, and all I'm doing is just draping it over my yarn like my hook like that. I'm just putting the yarn in the mouth of the hook. You want to leave enough of a tail so you can finish that later for weaving in your end. So leave it a nice long tail, and then just bring that through and you're done. And then do your chain for your next row. You can chain 3 if you're going to do double. And then what that is giving you is a nice clean stripe. Okay. All right, so depending on how you're working and depending on what your striping pattern is, so if I changed to yellow, I worked all the way across, I changed back to gray, my gray yarn was over here, so I had to cut my gray and reattach it over here. But another option would be to work yellow all the way across, chain up, work yellow all the way back, and then continue with the gray that was on this side, and you can just carry it up the side. So if you're doing two rows, then you can find your previous color that you left behind back on this row where you started. And I'll show you what that looks like on this project. That might be a good segue into our next section. And of course, I'll go over anything else again if you need me to. Well, you can see here, I worked 2 rows. I worked this cream row all the way over, all the way back. And then I carried my brown from the stripe below it up. So you get these floats on the side. I worked my brown all the way over and then all the way back. I found my cream yarn. I carried it up the side. And again, cream all the way over and back. I found my brown yarn and carried it up. So what you end up with are these vertical floats. And for this hat that we're making, this is going to be hidden in the seam. So is it showing up clear? Can you see what I'm talking about? So these are going to be hidden in the seam, so it doesn't make much difference. Now, if this were a baby blanket, you might not want it because maybe something could get caught in there and snag it, or if it were a scarf, maybe that edge doesn't look as nice. But another thing you could do would be to do a border. You could do a crocheted border along the edge to hide that. But if you have to cut it each time and weave in your ends, that's going to be a lot of ends to weave in. How do you feel about that, Claire? What would you do?
Yeah, I'd probably be tempted to put a border on there and hide that rather than weave in all those little ends.
I think I'd rather put a border on it too. That's a lot of work weaving in ends. Although in crochet, sometimes you can crochet over them, but that's another topic for another day. There's always something new to learn in crochet. I don't think you can ever learn everything. All right, so we have a little bit of time left before we move on to the pattern. Are there any questions at all about anything we've covered today? I'll be glad to go over anything again to help out. How we doing?
We did have a question. Can you show how to do that again? I'm asking. Okay. Can you show maybe on the swatch how you would carry yarn up the side to make floats?
Oh, let me see. I don't know if I have the yarn handy to do that. I didn't have 2 balls of thick yarn in different colors, so. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of abandon this row. Let me just do it like this. This is what I'll do. I'm going to just pretend I went all the way across, or maybe for some reason you're only gonna go part of the way in a pattern, and that's fine too. So turn your work, chain up, turn your work, and go back through. I'll split my strands of yarn. So I'm trying to hurry. When you try to hurry, nothing goes right. Okay, I'm getting to my last one. I'm doing half double. So yarn over, go through that last stitch, bring up a loop, and then I'm going to take my gray that I left behind, pick it up, just drape it over your loop, over your hook. I'm sorry, just catch it with your hook, and then bring it through all. Finish your last step of the stitch, and then chain. And then that's all you would do. You would just kind of carry that up. And then the next time you'll carry the yellow up the side too. And with this, because I'm working with such big yarn and doing half double, it is going to be a very long float, and you would almost certainly have to either hide that in a seam or do a border. So for something like this, you would want to conceal it somehow. So does that help? We've got about 10 minutes left. We want to review the pattern. How are we doing, Claire?
We're doing okay. Sorry, I'm typing away here, trying to think
Okay.
about 2 things at once.
All right.
Before we cover the hat pattern, maybe you can show us how to weave in the end on your swatch there.
Okay. So let's do that. Let me rip this. So once you've finished the end, okay, so I finished my row. You're just going to take a pair of scissors and just cut it. And you want to make sure you're leaving a long enough end to work with. And then you're just going to pull it straight up until you pull it out of that loop. Okay, and everything's nice and secure. This might be a little too long. You don't need to leave quite this much. About 4 inches, maybe 4 or 6 inches would be plenty. Don't make it too short. Too short, it's hard to work. Okay. And then this is a large-eyed blunt needle. It just has a large enough eye for
you turned your head again.
Oh, it just has a large enough eye to put yarn through, and it's blunt, so it's not sharp. We're going between the strands of yarn. We're not piercing them. Okay. Thread the needle. And crochet stitches are 3-dimensional, so it's really easy to hide your stitches. So I'm going to, sure, I'm getting a clear picture. So I'm just going to go down. You don't want to go through here because you'll kind of unravel it. So I'm just going to kind of go down the side by going through here. And I'm going to work my way across. And let me switch to a different needle. I'm going to switch to this old needle because it might show up a little better. So I'm going to go back across. I'm going to go like through here. So I don't know if you can see. I'm just going to go through like that. Now, what you want to do before you put through is you want to double check the back and make sure you can't see anything. Because if you can see big pieces of your needle, then that's where your yarn's going to come through as well. So you're going to pull it through. And you don't want to pull it tight, so kind of massage it out a little bit. And then you want to go up to the next, well, let's go down to the row below it. That might be easier to see. So we're going to get down to the row below it. And you don't want to pull it tight, so just make sure you're working with a light hand. And massage everything out so it's not puckered. And I'm going to, again, kind of go in the middle of this stitch, kind of burying it. I'm going to do it wrong to show you what it looks like if it's wrong. So I'm going to, now let's look at the back. So you can see the back, you can see this needle. If I pull my yarn through, then you're going to see strands of yarn right where that needle is. So that's not right. So let's try it again. Be very careful this time. I'm not going deep. I'm just going under one strand of yarn because I'm trying to hide it. I'm not trying to go through all the layers. Okay. So I'm just going to go through under here. So I'm kind of going under one strand, but I'm doing it deep enough so that you can't really see it. Now, when I pull my yarn back, my needle through, check this side, everything looks good. So I'm going to pull my yarn tight, snip it close to the surface. You don't want to cut your fabric though, and then just kind of massage everything out, and it looks very nice. Now, the temptation will be to tie a knot. So you don't want to tie knots because if you tie a knot, they will come unraveled eventually. I can't tell you how many vintage pieces of crochet that I've repaired because the creator tied knots. Those knots came unraveled and then the work unraveled. And then their grandchildren or their children wanted it to be repaired because it was a family heirloom. And it is able to be repaired, but if you're careful at the beginning, you won't have to worry about that. Also, knots they're unsightly. They leave a bump. They're not very professional looking. So it's best just to weave your ends in. How do you feel about knots, Claire? Do you tie knots?
Nope, no knots here.
No knots, not with knitting or crochet. Any other questions? Then you just weave the other one in the same way, just kind of burying it. So it's really easy with crochet. You just don't want to pull it tight, and you want to make sure that you're burying it in the middle so that you're not changing the look of your fabric. Okay. Anything else?
Let's go over this hat pattern real quickly.
All right, so quickly. So a pattern is very much like a recipe. This pattern, it's a free pattern from Lion Brand, and you can always download and print a new copy. Then either type this number in, or you can type the name of it. If crochet level 2 striped hat, it should bring it right up, or with the number. This one is having you use 2 balls of yarn because the pattern is creating a stripe. So you'll probably be able to make 2 hats out of it, or 1 ball of yarn if you want to make a solid color. You need a crochet hook size J, which is a 6 millimeter. So always double check the millimeters. And you'll need large-eyed blunt needles for weaving in the ends. So you just need 1 needle for weaving in the ends. Okay. There's just some notes. It's worked in 1 piece, and you go back and forth. So I'm not going to read those to you. Let's just jump into the pattern. So this is nice because it gives you a chart. And it's a nice, gentle introduction to reading a chart. So now you can start looking at the chart and reading the words. So you could create this entire hat by either only looking at the chart or only looking at the words. Or what I like to do is I'll read the words, and if I don't quite understand what the words are telling me, you can double check it in the chart and see if you can figure it out. So that kind of gives you two ways to figure it out. But it's nice as in an early kind of beginning stage to start looking at charts and becoming familiar with them, because they'll be very handy later. So with A, so you're going to have color A and color B, and you can decide which one you want to be A or B, whatever two colors you choose. And so with color A, you're going to chain 33. And with A, you're going to double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. You've skipped the first 3 chains and they do not count as a stitch. So we talked about that, how to chain up, add extra stitches to create the side. And in each chain across, you're going to have 30 double crochets in this row. So you're going to chain 33. And if you look here on the chart, if you count all of these little circles, little ovals, they count as a chain. You have 30 chains. You have 3 that create the side, and that's kind of giving you an idea of what it is doing on the side. And then you're going to work back across and have 30 double crochets. Right here, you're going to chain 3 to go up. And then you're going to work back across with 30 more double crochets. And then you're going to chain 2. So if you're chaining 2, then that is, you're going to do 2 rows of half double. And if we look down here, it tells us with rows 3 and 4, with color B, you're going to chain 2, and that does not count as a stitch. So just remember, we're not counting that as a stitch. You're going to turn, you're going to half double crochet in each stitch across, changing to A in the last stitch of row 4. So just remember, you're going to change to A the way we change colors, the way we did in the last stitch, in the very last step of that last stitch. So we pretty much know how to do all of this. Rows 5 and 6, we're going to go back to A. We're going to chain 1. So that's a clue, something different. Does not count as a stitch. So we're going to turn. We're going to single crochet in each stitch across, changing to B in the last stitch of the 6th row. So you do need to read that carefully. So rows 5 and 6, we're going to work 2 rows, and we're not going to change to B until we get to the last stitch on row number 6. So just remember, you're doing 2 rows there. Same thing with 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then you're going to repeat rows 3 through 10 until the piece measures about 19 inches. From the beginning, you're going to end with a row 4 or a row 8 as the last row that you work. Now, sometimes this doesn't always work out just so. Depending on how big or how small your stitches are, you might get to 19 inches, or maybe even 20 inches, and you might not be where they're telling you to. But I would just stop when I got to 19 inches, even if I didn't finish the striping pattern that they wanted. What would you do in that case, Claire? How would you handle that?
Oh, if I got to 19 inches and I wasn't done with the pattern repeat,
Yeah.
I would probably just stop where I am, although I think 19 inches is maybe a little bit small for an adult hat. So maybe I'd keep going if I have a larger head.
Yeah, but if, like, say you wanted to make it 22 inches, I think I would stop at the measurement that I wanted rather than keep going with the striping pattern. Because if the hat's too big, then it's not going to be useful. And then you're going to fasten off and cut your yarn, leaving a long tail. So fasten off the way I showed you. You want to leave a tail that's about 20 inches, 25 inches long in this case, because we're going to use that for seaming. And so what you're going to end up with is a striped pattern like this. You're going to end up with stripes that are different thicknesses because we're using, single crochet, double, half double. We're doing all kinds of different stitches. And so here is where I finished. Here is my long tail. I'm going to put this on a darning needle. And then all I'm going to do at the top well, here's one thing you do want to make sure you do. I didn't do this very nicely. When I finished my row, I ended it here, and this should be the bottom edge of my hat. What I really want is the top edge to be here, because I want to catch this in my seam. So what I would do then would be to weave in that end, and I would have to rejoin another strand of yarn here. So let's just do that. And so all you would do then would be, you kind of want to go in and out, back and forth like this. So maybe I'm going to obviously you would want to
Darrin, we did not hear the beginning of that sentence.
Sorry, I'm switching to gold yarn so you can see what I'm doing more clearly, but you would want to stay with whatever yarn you made your project with. You can see I'm not being very careful, but you want to maybe go in and out of each stripe. So in one stripe and then back out the same stripe. And this is just going to be for gathering the top of the hat. So this is not really sewing it yet. This is just gathering the top. So I'm just going up and then back down. And this is just going to kind of gather the top to close it. So are you any questions about what I'm doing here? Are you able to see what I'm doing? It'll make sense here in a minute. I'm just trying to go fast because we're running out of time. If I were really making a hat, I would probably be a little more careful in this. Or maybe not.
And just in case anybody does have to run right now, remember that we recorded this class and it'll be posted on the Michael's YouTube channel in a couple of days. So you can come back and catch anything you missed or pause and rewind as many times as needed.
Okay. Almost done, really. We're just going to show one more thing. So I just want to show you how to gather the top of this hat. If you've never done it before, it might sound tricky, but it's very easy. So you just kind of go up, you're going up and down, kind of in and out. And when you get to the end, you're going to pull it, and you can see how it's just gathering it up tight. And so I've kind of closed up the top. And you want to make sure, here I might tie a little knot to just kind of help secure it. I'm not going to cut my yarn here, but I'd probably go, pull it really tight, and then just kind of maybe go back and forth there a couple of times to really secure it, because you don't want that top to work open. So maybe go in and out there a couple of times to just kind of just really secure it. Okay, and now I'm going to seam the side. And when you're seaming the side, you want to line up the bottom edge, and you can put a clip on it. You could kind of tie it with yarn, or you could put like a clothespin or one of those clips that hold potato chip bags closed to kind of keep everything lining up. And then for the side seam, I wouldn't do much different, honestly. I like to do the running stitch. And so what I would do for the side seam is you want to look and see if you were going to crochet, that's probably, this is my chain edge, so I'd probably go through there because I'm going right under 2 strands. And then on this edge is my finished edge. So if I were going to crochet, I would go right under there. So I'm going to go under each stitch, and that's going to help keep my stitches to be spaced out nice and even and always going the same depth. And that will make my sewing look very nice. So I'm just going under that stitch as if I were going to crochet it. And you wouldn't want to skip any because you want a nice strong seam. So if I were going to crochet, I'd go right there, right there. Now, if you're not a seamstress and you don't have experience sewing, you don't have to have anxiety, because remember, you'll be using the same color yarn that you made the hat with, and your stitches aren't going to really show up. And if they don't look nice, you can take it out and give it another try. Crocheted fabric is very forgiving like that. Okay. Any questions about the seaming? And then once you get to the end, you'll just weave in your ends like I showed you before. Okay. Any questions? I did want to show you this other hat. I made this one. I followed the same pattern, but I chained 10 extra stitches. I chained 43 instead of 33 to make it longer. And instead of doing stripes, I just worked the whole hat in either, I think I did double or half double. And then I ran out of brown, so I just did this last little segment in black, but I think it looks okay. So you could use the same pattern and make a solid color hat. Once you've made the striped hat, feel free to experiment. Maybe you want to make a smaller hat for a child, measure your child's head. If their head's 16 inches, make the hat that big. If you want a really long slouchy hat, you could make extra, you could chain us at a 43, you could change 53. Or if you want a hat for a costume, like a funny, really long hat, you could chain 103 and make like a really long elf hat or something. So don't be afraid to experiment, make changes to the pattern, be willing to make mistakes and write down what you did and try it again. Don't be timid about that. So any questions about anything we covered today at all? Anything at all?
I just put the links to both the handout and the pattern in the chat again, in case anybody else needed those, and put the PDFs there if you wanted to grab those again before we go. And just another reminder that we did record this class, so that'll be posted in a couple of days on the Michael's YouTube channel. And hopefully, if you're going to join us next week for Crochet 103, you have time to practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, it just takes practice. And if you need any help or have any additional questions, you can contact me on social media. Maybe Claire will put my social media name in the chat. It's Mr. Woolly Bear on Instagram. Just send me a direct message. Or on Facebook, it's just my name spelled out just the way it is on screen. Just send me a direct message with your questions, and I'll be glad to get back to you and help you. I don't mind. I hate the thought of anyone out there struggling when a quick question could get them moving back on their way. So anything else before we go? Any other questions? How we doing? Doing all right?
I think we are good.
All right, so practice, try to practice a little each day. I promise the more you have it in your hand and the more you practice, the better it'll feel and the better you will do. So practice and have fun. Thanks for coming to class.